The road to growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Realtor Growth listeners. Today I have Renzie Richardson. She is the founder and CEO of BHFL Group. Thank you, Renzie, for being here today.
Thank you for having me as your guest. I'm excited about the opportunity.
Pleasure's all mine. So at the BHFL Group, and I got to make sure that I say the right letter just to kind of jive well. So you're a coaching business, and because I've had a decent amount of coaches on here, I always love asking the question, what separates you from other coaches or your group?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited about, what we're doing at BHFL Group. And I think one of the things that separate us is that in addition to the services that we also offer products. As an example, with our coaching programs, we have workbooks that help our clients to really map out a strategy. And it's not just about having a conversation, but walking away with a roadmap that will allow you to understand, what are these steps you have to take? What are those milestones? And just to reinforce what we're coaching as well as to make it sustainable. So that's one of our differentiators.
So the big thing is kind of like having a structure in place, a roadmap, instead of kind of just free flowing.
Yes. I mean, I can have a conversation with you. I can tell you great things that will help you to grow and scale your business. But I think sometimes, especially we as adult learners, as much as we can have information that we can retain, the more likely we'll use that information. And so that's why it's so important to me that we give them a more structured format.
Well, and it makes it, I think, more palatable. I mean, for example, if you're, working out at the gym or buying a house, knowing what the next step is makes it more palatable instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to go from basically selling nothing to selling 20 million, 100 million, whatever it might be. It just seems overwhelming. So I fully understand with you.
Yeah. And there's a higher level of accountability too. It's kind of hard to BS when it's in writing.
Fair enough. Well, let's rewind. Have you always been in the coaching field?
Honestly, if I take you back, yes, and I'll tell you why I say yes. When I was in high school and college, I played team sports, and for that's a whole coaching model around how you help individuals to tap into their their sport or their whatever their expertise is as a, if you're a guard, if you're a forward guard and that kind of stuff. So that's how I grew up, is playing sports. And with sports, there's always coaching. And even when I transitioned into corporate, even in my role as an HR director, a lot of the leaders and in the C-suite, it was always around coaching, helping them to make the best decision for whatever the circumstance was, and just helping the organization to move forward. So using a lot of the methodology that I learned as a player, I use those same methodology as part of my coaching, and it has helped me to be successful over the years.
Well, let's talk about that. So you played sports in high school and college. What sports did you play?
Basketball, like March Madness.
Yeah. So you're playing basketball in high school, going to college. Did you think there was a next level after college for you?
Well, no, really, I didn't. And even back then, when I was getting ready to go to college, I met Pat Summitt. She was the head coach for UT girls basketball. Back then, she was doing her own dog and pony show, and I had a chance to meet her, but not understanding, basketball other than what I knew in my community. And so I went to college, but I went to a small liberal arts college and I played sports. But after I graduated and before I went to corporate, I coached sports at the high school level. And one of my accomplishments, I was named Coach of the Year, and just taking everything that I've learned in college and high school and youth, and using those same techniques with the team that I was the girls team that I was coaching at the time. So I just believe in coaching. I believe in the model of coaching and how sports coaching applies to how we run our organization, how we perform. It's just a model that I've kept over the years, and I know it's a very successful model.
So, with the success that you were having as a high school coach, why did you not make that a career? Why did you not make that your career?
Be, and here again, not having focus or not understanding having a focus. I chose not to do that, and then being married with kids and all of this other stuff. Being a mom was more important than at that time pursuing a career in education. And not only that, I didn't like the bureaucracy. That was the other side of it. I didn't like having to all of the bureaucracy around, being a teacher, and it was just kind of not my cup of tea, but I love the game of sports. And anytime that I could use those principles in anything that I was part of, I always went back to, those principles.
Well, what bureaucracy were you talking about that basically you didn't like? Was it like
Um,
people looking over your shoulders, or what happened?
No, that was great, but even back then, it's even more prevalent today. Having to deal with the politics of parents,
Oh,
having to deal with the politics of the boards, having to deal with the politics of local local stuff, and that was just very daunting at the time. It's how do you walk on eggshells and create this amazing team? How do you do that? I didn't do it too well.
well, so you realize that maybe even though you're having success in coaching, right? You realize that's not going to be the future for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like the family aspect of it was more of kind of like that shining light. Did you have an idea of how, I mean, business wise, what you're going to do? Or was it even thinking about business at that time, or just thinking solely on family, or what was the mindset there?
Well, the mindset was first and foremost, I wanted to make sure that I was a fantastic mom. And, once and this was in Texas, and after we left Texas and came back to Georgia, it was an opportunity for me to reset my career. But I wanted to do something that I knew. And what I knew was, team. Back then, everybody was into team building, everybody was into how people come together and perform. And that was an area where I felt like I could really make a difference. So, using my contacts, using my relationships, I was able to look at how I can get back into, I guess you say, the workplace and utilize what I knew that I was pretty good at, and that was around training and development and coaching.
And you got into the HR space. Was that originally the intention? Was it okay? I think human resources would give me the most correlation to coaching, or was it I just need to get into the corporate world and find where my best fit's going to be?
No, actually, it was in human resources management and development because, when I started my career back then, now about 30 years ago, everything kind of fell under the umbrella of HR. All of the team building, all of the training, all
Mm.
of that fell under that umbrella. So I knew that that was a good fit for me. And then going back to school to get my master's, that kind of helped me to, I guess you say, be more competitive in moving, being able to advance my career. So I knew I was in the right place. But like I say, just moving from that mindset of being a mom versus now, you're wanting you moving yourself up, positioning you to be in the workplace and be competitive so you can advance your career. So that was my strategy back then.
Now, what did you have to learn to adapt what you already knew as a high school coach compared to, I mean, leading children, I mean, or young
Mhm.
adults compared to leading grown adults or somewhat grown adults? What do you have to learn in that process of how you would coach them, bring them along, lead them?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a lot of the same principles. You're talking about wanting to really access their strengths or develop their strengths, whether it's a child, a teenager, or an adult. You're looking at ways in terms of how you can identify, like if you're dealing with a child, how do you help them to learn at an early age those critical connections between um, their, like motor skills, how they move, developing their verbal skills, and just really, really tapping into their capabilities. You do that as a child with a child. Same thing with a teenager. Understanding exactly what their strengths are, their capabilities, and really tapping into that and helping them to understand and to leverage what those strengths are. And it applies to the workplace. If you look at a lot of the assessment tools that we have now in the workplace or just around development, it's about understanding what your strengths are, understanding what your limitations are, and how to mitigate those limitations. And I do a lot of work with CEOs to help them to understand what their blind spots are and understanding how to surround themselves with people to help them mitigate those areas where they're limited. And so it's the same principles that you apply to, if you want to call it human performance. I don't know what you want to call it, but they're the same principles that you apply to human beings.
So you're adapting to human resources. You mean you were there for a good amount of time, correct? You were
Yes.
25 years, I believe, 30 years.
22 years I was in corporate. Yes. 22
Okay.
years. Yeah.
And when did the idea of leaving the corporate world um, and start your own business kind of come about, or even start thinking about that idea?
Well, in the early 80s, there was a lot of IT companies, there was a lot of investors, and along with that, there was a lot of turnover, upsizing, downsizing, right sizing. And so a couple of times I was laid off. And here again, when you got investors and you have to realize, a profit at the bottom line, the first group you cut is the top layer. That's the first group you cut. And so I was in that bracket for a couple of years, in my career, and I was cut a couple of times. And I was just saying, is this how I want to work? Not sure if I'm going to have stability because and here again, back then there was a lot of pre-IPOs, IPOs, and that kind of stuff, and with a lot of investors. And sometimes you don't have control over your company when you have investors who are the stakeholders versus you having sole ownership of your company. And so I went through a couple of downsizing and whatnot. So I started thinking about an exit strategy to say, do I want to continue to work like this, or do I want to take control over, how I work, when I work, and just making sure that I could provide a level of security for myself as opposed to looking to someone else to provide that security to me. So I started looking at that in 2008, and then I started my company in 2012.
Now, in that 4 year window of time, I mean, what were you going through? Because I think a lot of people, again, I mean, were in your situation or are in your situation where they think about, okay, I want to transition into building my own business, right? Yet
Mhm.
it's, I mean, for the most part on here, it's not a quick just, okay, I'm quitting tomorrow and I'm gonna start it tomorrow, right? It
No,
is that slow burn, right?
it
So what were you
is.
doing in that window?
In that window of time, I was making a lot of mistakes. So I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So one of the things I said, oh, I love sports. I love to be active. I love running. So I went back to school to become a personal trainer and a health coach. But then I realized that it did not give me the substance of what I was looking for in terms of making a huge impact and making a huge difference. And not only that, I wasn't earning the income that I wanted to. Okay. So, so scratch that plan. And then, I looked at possibly doing some subcontract work. And that kind of led me to, starting my business. And my first client that I had, his proposal writer went out, and his HR consultant. They were two of the same roles. She wore dual hats. She went out on maternity leave, and he asked me to come in. He said, well, you write policies and all of that. You can do the HR part, but I think you can also help us with proposal writing and proposal development. So that was my first assignment. And that really gave me an opportunity to look at the opportunity to start my company, earn the revenue that I wanted to earn, create the schedule that I wanted to create, but still understanding that I still had a lot of learning to do in terms of how to run a company. I was good at what I was good at, but just because you're good at what you know doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to run a company. So I having to put myself in position to learn a lot about marketing, learning a lot about accounting, systems and operations, all of that infrastructure stuff that I didn't know, but very, very important when you're thinking about, your company, when you're thinking about being profitable, understanding where your money is going. Those things are really important. And so that was my learning curve in the early years of my business. And I know why it's so valuable now to learn those functional things, but likewise, you have to understand the strategic side of your organization also.
So did you have, in that 4-year window from when you officially started, were you still working at the corporate world, or did you have overlap in it while you're building your business, or what happened there?
As a matter of fact, I was, and you probably heard the term, having a gig on the side, meaning that you're still working your full-time job, but you're working a gig on the side. And a lot of people say, well, I'll start my business this way because you use your full-time job to kind of finance your gig or the start of your company. And that's just something common that happens. But it allowed me to create an exit strategy to make sure that when I decided I guess you say, step into my company full time, that I had the wherewithal to replace at least 50% of my income that I was receiving from my job versus just going cold turkey.
So that was your number? Was it, if your company, your side gig, as you called it, was making 50% of the income that your current job at that time was pulling in, that you'd be able to leave?
Yes, that was my goal. That was my goal, is that I wanted to earn enough money, at least 50% of my salary with my gig. And then with that, I could use that, or that gave me enough leverage to go ahead and transition to look at working in my business full time. And here again, you got to be good at sales, marketing, and selling yourself, because you have a threshold. For me, it was a threshold of about 90 days before I really had really good revenue coming in that would sustain and support me and maintain me in a lifestyle that I was comfortable with.
So what did it feel like at that time when you gave up your quote unquote side gig to go
Mhm.
full time in building your business? What did that feel like for you?
It was a leap of faith because just like most of us, there's a level of assurance when you know that every 2 weeks you're going to get a check, whether, for the most part, whether you did a good job or whether you did a bad job, for the most part, unless you do something very egregious, you got a job. And so to go from what we call that type of security to now where you taking your destiny in your own hand to say how you're going to earn a living, how you going to work, how often you're going to work, and if you're going to bring in enough revenue to support you and the business. It's a step. It's a big step that you're taking, but I've never regret taking that step, because I know for me at that point in my career, I know that it was time for me to transition out. And if people ask me today, I will tell you I'm a much better business owner than I will be anybody's employee. I know that for a fact.
Was there I mean, have there been moments at times where maybe you didn't have that same sentiment of why did I take this jump?
Oh, of course. More than one time. Uh,
What what keeps you going in those times, in those low moments?
you first and foremost, you when you decide that you're going to start your business, for me, it's a commitment. I took a commitment to start my business, and I went back in to the company, to run a contract, to do a project, and they said, well, you need to be an employee to do the project, so I did that. But that, even so, I think that project was about 9 months long. But even during that period of time, I there were signs that told me that I knew that I made the right decision to be a business owner versus an employee, because it's hard for me when you know that you're at that pivotal point in terms of what you do, what you can do with that knowledge. Do you stay in a company, and in some ways you're playing small, or do you create a stage for yourself where you can play big? Okay, I wanted a stage where I could play big, and so I was grateful for that assignment to go back in and do that leadership project. But likewise, when that project was up and I was offered an opportunity to stay on, I knew that that would have been a really bad decision for me to stay on.
Did I mean, so it's talking about making something bigger than where you currently are. Did you also have, I mean, because you also talked about the idea that there's things you had to learn on the way to getting to where you are today. Did you
Yes.
have a mentor? Did you have a coach? Did you have a group of people around you that were in similar boat? I mean, how were you allowing yourself to grow?
For one thing, I'm a reader. I love reading. So that was a source for me, as well as I belong to a couple of networks where I can interact with other successful CEOs. I know a lot, during that time, and even today, because of the kind of work that I do, I have access to a lot of successful CEOs, and just being a part of their company, or providing services to them, even though I may be serving them, but just because you're serving them doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for you to learn as well. So having these relationships and understanding how to leverage these relationships, it really helped me to position my company. And the other thing I would tell anyone who's listening to this podcast is that when you're learning, and there are key people that you want to surround yourself with, to because you want to learn from them, or you want them to mentor you, I made it, I guess you say, interesting or palatable for them, because it wasn't a lifelong assignment. So, as an example, one of the best CEOs, not CEOs, but CFOs that I know, after he and I, we worked at the same company, but I wanted to stay in contact with him, but I wanted to learn a lot from him too. So I reached out to him to say, would you mind having some mentoring sessions with me for the next 6 weeks? And I told him exactly these are the things that I wanted to learn. And because I gave him a start point and an end point, he could work it into his schedule. I told him exactly what I wanted to learn from him. So that helped him to say, if I'm going to mentor Renzie, what do I do? How do I help her? So I helped him to help me. And so that was one of the things that I think I did that was very advantageous, to utilize and leverage some of these key business owners, as well as people I knew in corporate, to help me.
With the growth from where you came from to where you are today, where do you see your future growth going? I mean, if we're talking the next 5 years from now, where do you see yourself and your business going?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for asking that question. I think with the leadership development programs that we have, and all of the programs that we have, one of the things that I see in the near future is either franchising our company, or having our products and services that we offer, where they could be white labeled, licensed, where other business coaches can white label our products and services through licensing. So that's what I see in the next couple of years is to grow the company through using those two strategies.
When you've talked to us, I mean, so much about systems, structure. I mean, even in your own life, of like, okay, well, I need this to happen before I can do this, right? So you're very systematic, very structure oriented, and something that we haven't talked about was something in your own coaching business, your 12-step program. Can you
Mhm.
kind of walk us a little more about that?
Yes, I can, and thank you. With the 12-step program is I guess you say it's a culmination of several things that I was doing with our coaching business, but uh, it became more relevant doing, I guess you said, over the last 2.5 years with the changes that happened with the pandemic, the changes that happen in terms of how we work. And there's a lot of programs, and I noticed that there's so many programs out here and grants and just a lot of corporate sponsorship for programs to start your business, okay? But what I saw a void with programs that would teach and coach, business owners how to grow and scale their business. And particularly if you are in this bracket somewhere between 500K and maybe a million to 2 million. Now, if you're 3 million or more, yes, there are programs out there like WPO and some of these other programs. But if you're in that middle bracket, you don't qualify to for these other programs that are out there. So I saw that white space, and I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a woman in a minority owned business, and you did all of the things to start your company, you get to a point to saying, okay, now what's next? And a lot of times what next, and we're trying to grow and scale our company, what that means a lot of times for us is that we're going to run faster, run harder, and do more, meaning that you're working a lot more hours. You from going from 60 hours to now you're doing 70, 75 hours a week. And over time, what happens is that you burn out. And when you burn out, you disengage. And when you disengage, are you tracking those things to see where, if the company is losing revenue or if the company is growing revenue? Because you have to understand how to multiply your revenue and how to duplicate your effort without saying that means that I have to run harder, faster, as opposed to working smarter, as opposed to working harder.
So the 12 basic program, 12-step program will kind of give you a roadmap to kind of, okay, once you get to here, okay, now we got to incorporate this stuff to what you're doing and incorporate this stuff and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we start with an assessment first, okay? Because a lot of times what happened with a lot of these programs is cookie cutter. All programs start on the baseline and they all move along at the same pace. But all companies aren't structured like that. We develop 5 different stages to say where that business is in that model of saying you're a startup to a company that is mature. We have 5 different stages. So we look at where you are, and based on the stage where you are, it helps us to start building out that strategy. And it's a customized strategy based on your business, the stage that your business is in. And now we can create a roadmap to say, this is where you are. To take you to the next level, these are some things that we need to do to put in place as part of your strategy to help you grow and scale to the next level.
Renzie, I appreciate you being on the Road to Growth podcast. I'm going to finish off with one last question.
Sure.
Is there any advice you would give to yourself, that person that was in corporate world for 20 some years, that maybe would have allowed them to start their own business a little bit earlier?
Yes. I think for me, when I felt like, it, and you'd notice you feel it. I felt like I was being pushed to be, to do more, to have a greater impact. And if you get that push, listen to that and evaluate, if this is the right time for you to take a step out. And right now, there's a huge step out of corporate America because I think this pandemic has taught people, look, I don't have to work this way. I have other ways and other options available to me to work. But if you plan to exit, have a strategy to say how you're going to exit. That would be my advice that I would tell anyone.
Well, thank you again, Renzie. If someone's listening right now and they're looking to get more information about you or basically some coaching, what would be the best platform of them getting more information?
Well, the best way to reach out to me is you can call me, and our number is 470-655-1676, or you can reach out to me by our website, which is bhflgroup.com. And I think you have a copy of the website information,
Yeah.
so you can post that.
All the information is in the show notes. And I mean, everyone listening right now, it doesn't matter what you're looking to accomplish. Again, it could be losing weight, it could be leaving the corporate world, it could be buying a home, it could be whatever it is. Having a roadmap put in place and allowing you to take one step in front of the next, saying that, you know what, today I'm a little bit farther than I was yesterday, or tomorrow I'm a little bit farther than I was today. I mean, that's what matters. I get so many people that they get overwhelmed saying, I could never be that person. I can never be that. I can never do that. You can be if you have someone in your corner putting together that roadmap for you and allowing you the opportunity to move forward and get to where you need to get to. Again, thank you, Renzie, for being here today. Everyone, please subscribe, please share, go in the show notes, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.